It's 1979, gas prices are climbing, muscle cars are dying, and inside Pontiac's engineering labs, there's a quiet panic setting in. The sound isn't roaring V8s anymore, it's calculators, slide rules, emissions charts, and one dangerous question hanging in the air. How do you save performance when power itself is being outlawed? Most people think Pontiac's turbo experiment was just a bad idea, a desperate gimmick from the smog era. But what almost nobody knows is how close this engine came to rewriting American performance history, and how badly it all went wrong. This is the real story of Pontiac's 301 Turbo, the experiment that backfired, and why it still haunts GM engineers to this day. By the late 1970s, Pontiac was fighting for survival, not just for sales numbers, not just for market share, for its very identity. Just a decade earlier, they were kings of the street, GTOs that terrorized stoplight warriors, Firebirds that screamed through quarter miles, Ram air engines that shook the ground and made grown men grin like teenagers, big-inch V8s with compression ratios over 10.5 to 1, pulling hard past 6,000 RPM with an anger that Detroit had perfected over generations. Pontiac wasn't just a car company, it was a statement, a rebellion, a middle finger to boring transportation. But that world was gone, killed not by competitors, not by foreign imports, but by Washington. New federal emissions laws strangled horsepower with bureaucratic precision. The Clean Air Act of 1970 forced catalytic converters onto every new car. Unleaded fuel requirements killed high compression overnight because lead was the only thing keeping those tight combustion chambers from self-destructing. Insurance companies crushed muscle cars with brutal premiums that made a GTO more expensive to insure than a house. The 1-2 punch of the 1973 oil embargo and the 1979 Iranian Revolution sent gas prices into orbit. Americans who once celebrated burnouts now celebrated fuel economy. The entire cultural landscape shifted beneath Detroit's feet. By 1975, Pontiac's once mighty 400 V8 was down to barely 185 net horsepower. An engine that once made over 350 horsepower had been suffocated to mediocrity. The legendary 455 was dead, killed by emissions equipment that choked it like a python squeezing prey, and buyers were walking away without looking back. Showrooms that once buzzed with excitement now felt like funeral homes. Salesmen struggled to explain why a new Trans Am felt slower than a 5-year-old used one. The magic was gone. Inside GM, the message was clear. Downsize everything. Lighter blocks, smaller displacement, better fuel economy. The corporate mandate came down from the 14th floor like a death sentence. Pontiac engineers hated it. These were men who had spent careers building power, who understood that torque wasn't just a number, it was a feeling. Who knew that the difference between a good car and a great car was the shove in your back when you stomped the throttle. They didn't want to build soulless economy engines. They wanted torquey, character, speed. Something that still felt like a Pontiac. Something that still made the driver smile. So they looked for a loophole. If you can't increase displacement because the government is watching every cubic inch, if you can't raise compression because unleaded fuel won't tolerate it, what if you forced more air in? Turbocharging wasn't new. The technology dated back to the early 20th century. Oldsmobile had just tried it with the disastrous 1978 350 diesel-derived turbo V8 that earned a reputation for catastrophic failure. Porsche was proving it worked brilliantly on the 911 Turbo, making supercar power from a flat six. Saab was building its entire brand identity around boost, showing that small engines could punch far above their weight. Pontiac saw an opening. Boost could cheat the rules, make a small engine feel big, deliver torque on demand without the cubic inches that attracted regulatory attention. And on paper, it looked perfect. That decision led to the 301. At first glance, the Pontiac 301 looked like betrayal. It wasn't a traditional Pontiac V8 at all. Not in spirit, not in execution, not in anything that mattered to enthusiasts. Introduced in 1977, the 301 was a lightweight, thin-wall cast iron engine designed specifically for fuel economy. It shared almost nothing with the classic Pontiac blocks that had built the brand's reputation. Different casting techniques, different priorities, different philosophy. The bore measured 4.00 inches. The stroke was just 3.10 inches. Total displacement came to 301 cubic inches, or 4.9 liters. For perspective, the beloved Pontiac 400 had a 4.12-inch bore and 3.75-inch stroke. The 301 was smaller in every dimension that mattered for power. Compression ratio, a smog era-friendly 8.00 to 1 in turbo form, down from the 10.5 plus ratios that once defined Pontiac performance. And the block itself was fragile. To save weight and meet corporate fuel economy mandates, Pontiac engineers reduced material everywhere. Thinner main webs that flexed under stress, lighter crankshaft that twisted more than older designs, smaller main bearings than the old 400 and 455, cylinder walls that were adequate for normal use but marginal for anything more. The entire engine philosophy was different. Old Pontiac V8s were overbuilt. The 301 was optimized. In naturally aspirated trim, the 301 made between 135 and 170 horsepower depending on year, tune, and equipment. Adequate for moving a mid-size car, forgettable in every other way. The kind of engine that never appeared in anyone's dreams. But then came the turbo. Pontiac engineers bolted on a Garrett iResearch T3 turbocharger, and everything changed. At least that was the hope. The turbo installation was more sophisticated than most people remember. It wasn't just a turbo bolted to an exhaust manifold. There was a specific crossover exhaust system designed to feed the turbo efficiently. An intercooler would have helped enormously, but cost and packaging concerns eliminated that option. The intake system was revised to handle boost pressure. A new carburetor, the Rochester Quadrajet with specific boost enrichment circuits, was developed specifically for this application. Boost pressure was set conservatively at around 9 psi. On paper, that should have transformed the engine from economy car adequate to performance car exciting. And in the lab, it did. The turbocharged 301 produced 210 horsepower at 4,400 RPM. Not a mind-blowing number, but remember the context. This was 1980. The Corvette made 190 horsepower. The Z28 Camaro made 190 horsepower. Suddenly, the Firebird was the power king of the GM lineup. Torque peaked at about 345 lb-ft at just 2,000 RPM. That low RPM punch was the real story. It came on early, it came on strong, and it felt like the muscle car era had somehow survived. Those numbers don't sound impressive today. Modern V6 Camrys make more power, but in 1980, they mattered. This engine made more torque than Pontiac's own 400 from just a few years earlier. It outpulled Chevy's 305 by a significant margin. And it did it while meeting every emissions target and fuel economy mandate that the government demanded. On the street, when it worked, it felt shocking. Boost came on early thanks to the relatively small turbo. The Firebird Turbo Trans Am surged forward with a deep, whooshing growl that sounded unlike anything else on American roads. Magazine testers recorded 0-60 times in the mid-7-second range. Quarter miles around 15.5 seconds at roughly 90 mph. For reference, a 1980 Corvette ran similar numbers, and the Corvette was supposed to be the halo car, not fast by muscle car standards. A 1970 GTO would still embarrass it, but compared to everything else in 1980, it was a revelation. And Pontiac wrapped it in something unforgettable. The Turbo Trans Am. Black paint so deep it looked like a portal to another dimension. Gold accents that caught sunlight and announced your arrival from blocks away. Snowflake wheels that became iconic. And a hood bird so big it looked alive. spreading its wings across the entire hood like a declaration of war against mediocrity. This wasn't a penalty box. This was a statement. In 1980, the Turbo Trans Am even paced the Indianapolis 500, rolling down the main straight at the Brickyard, leading the greatest spectacle in racing. The image of that black and gold bird against the Indianapolis skyline was broadcast to millions. Pontiac was back in the spotlight. The brand that refused to die, the brand that found a way. But there was a problem. Actually, there were several, and they would prove fatal. The first issue was heat. Turbocharging generates enormous exhaust temperatures. The turbine housing of the T3 Turbo glowed cherry red under sustained boost. Exhaust gas temperatures exceeded 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit, and the 301 was never designed for sustained thermal stress. The thin cast iron block didn't dissipate heat well. Material that had been removed to save weight would have helped manage temperatures. Cylinder walls flexed under boost as they heated and cooled unevenly. Head gaskets struggled to survive the thermal cycling. The underhood temperatures were brutal. Electrical components aged prematurely. Vacuum lines became brittle and cracked. The turbo itself sat in an environment that accelerated wear on everything around it. Then came detonation. Even with low compression, boost plus poor fuel quality was a deadly combination. The knock sensor technology we take for granted today didn't exist in any meaningful form. Modern engines can detect knock and retard timing within milliseconds. The 301 Turbo had none of that sophistication, and fuel quality in 1980 was wildly inconsistent. Octane ratings varied from station to station. Some pumps delivered fuel that was barely adequate for a lawnmower. The 301 Turbo needed consistent, quality fuel to survive. It rarely got it. Pontiac tried to manage detonation with crude solutions. Retarded ignition timing that sacrificed power for safety. Rich fuel mixtures that hurt fuel economy. Electronic spark control that reacted slowly and crudely to conditions. The result? Power fell off at high RPM when the engine should have been screaming. Engines felt strong down low, then flat and breathless up top. The characteristic turbo rush gave way to frustration just when you wanted more, and then things started breaking. Mechanics reported cracked exhaust manifolds from extreme heat cycling. The manifolds would glow red, cool down, heat up again, and eventually fail. Turbo bearings failed due to oil coking. When engine oil gets so hot it turns to carbon and destroys the turbo's lubrication system. Pistons showed signs of collapse from sustained detonation that the driver never even heard. The piston crowns would literally cave in from the repeated hammering of uncontrolled combustion. But the real nightmare was deeper, inside the block. The 301's lightweight bottom end simply wasn't built for boost. Every component had been designed for naturally aspirated duty. At higher mileage, main bearings wore rapidly because they were undersized for the loads they now faced. Crankshafts flexed more than they should have, accelerating bearing wear. Oil pressure dropped when hot, just when the engine needed lubrication most. Some engines survived. Careful owners who understood the engine's limitations and treated it gently could get reasonable life from the 301 Turbo. Many didn't. Owners who drove it like a muscle car found themselves walking home. One Pontiac technician reportedly said, "It ran great until it didn't, and when it went fast." Another mechanic described the experience of a 301 Turbo failure. One minute the owner is smiling. The next minute there's smoke everywhere and metal coming out of the oil pan. The warranty claims piled up. Service bulletins circulated through Pontiac dealers. Word spread through the enthusiast community. But Pontiac wasn't done yet. For 1981, they tried to fix it. The turbo was revised with better bearings. Boost was dialed back slightly to reduce stress. Engine management was tweaked with more conservative calibrations. Oil drain back from the turbo was improved to reduce coking. Power dropped to around 200 horsepower. It was safer. more reliable, less likely to scatter its internals across the highway, and less exciting. The mid-7-second 0-60 runs became mid-8-second runs. The visceral punch that made magazine testers grin faded to something merely adequate. The magic that justified the complexity was diminishing. Sales followed the same curve. In 1980, Pontiac built roughly 5,700 Turbo-Trans AMs. Dealers couldn't keep them in stock initially. In 1981, production fell sharply as word spread about reliability concerns. Buyers who wanted performance looked elsewhere. Buyers who wanted reliability never considered the turbo option in the first place. By 1982, the experiment was over. The 301 Turbo was dead. No farewell press conference, no redemption arc, no promise of future improvements. Just silence. The production lines switched to other engines without ceremony. The tooling was repurposed, and the 301 Turbo became a footnote. So why did it fail? Not because turbocharging was wrong, the technology was sound, the concept was valid, the market was ready, but because the foundation was fatally flawed. Pontiac tried to force-feed an engine designed to be light, cheap, and economical. They asked thin castings to handle thermal stress they couldn't dissipate. They asked small bearings to survive cylinder pressures they were never meant to see. They asked a fuel economy engine to become a performance engine through boost alone. A turbo doesn't just add power, it multiplies stress everywhere. The pistons take more heat because combustion is more intense. The rods see higher loads because cylinder pressure is dramatically increased. The crankshaft twists harder because torque multiplication happens faster than the rotating assembly was designed for. The head gasket must seal against pressures that would never exist in natural aspiration. Every component is pushed beyond its design envelope. And unlike Ford's later turbocharged 2.3-liter Lima engines that would power the Thunderbird Turbo Coupe and SVO Mustang, or Buick's legendary Turbo V6 that would become the basis for the Grand National, Pontiac didn't redesign the 301 from the ground up for boost. They adapted it. Too little engineering, too little development time, too little understanding of what forced induction truly demands, too late to matter. There's a painful irony here. At the same time Pontiac's 301 Turbo was failing, Buick was quietly perfecting its own forced induction masterpiece just down the hall at GM, the 3.8-liter Turbo V6, stronger block design from the beginning with boost in mind, better oiling system to keep the turbo alive, smarter engine management that improved with each model year, a development program that learned from mistakes rather than repeating them. By 1987, the Buick Turbo V6 would power the Grand National GNX to low 13-second quarter miles, faster than Corvettes, faster than Ferraris, faster than anything wearing an American badge. Pontiac had the idea first. Buick finished the job. And that's the real tragedy. Because for a brief moment, Pontiac stood at the edge of the future. The 301 Turbo proved that boost could save performance in the emissions era. It proved Americans would accept turbos. It proved small engines didn't have to feel small. It proved there was still a market for performance when everyone said the market was dead. But it also proved something else. Engineering shortcuts always come due. Cutting corners always catches up. The foundation always matters. Today, the Pontiac 301 Turbo is remembered as a curiosity, a footnote in automotive history, a cautionary tale told in engineering schools and enthusiast forums. Collectors don't chase the engine, they chase the car. The Turbo Trans Am remains iconic, not because of what it was, but because of what it tried to be. An American muscle car fighting extinction with technology instead of cubic inches. A symbol of an era when Detroit was struggling to reinvent itself. A desperate, beautiful, flawed attempt to preserve something worth preserving. And in that sense, it didn't fail completely, because every modern turbocharged performance car, every EcoBoost Mustang screaming down a drag strip, Every turbo V6 Camaro embarrassing cars with twice its displacement. Every boosted American engine making power levels that seemed impossible in 1980. They all trace a line back to this moment, to a thin-wall V8, a whistling turbo, and a risky idea in a desperate time. Pontiac's 301 Turbo didn't save the muscle car, but it showed the future, and sometimes being early is its own kind of failure. If you enjoyed this deep dive, let me know in the comments what story you want next. Another forgotten engine? Another experiment that almost worked? Or another piece of automotive history that deserves the truth? And make sure to subscribe, because the next story gets even wilder.